All right, so let's hop into the Kubeflow notebooks. So what are Kubeflow notebooks? Really, Kubeflow notebooks are kind of your portal into the Kubeflow world. So whether you're a data scientist or you're an operations team trying to build out pipelines, Kubeflow notebooks are that IDE that gives you that portable environment, whether it's locally or on a shared environment. Notebooks are commonly used to develop Python code. You can, like I said, whether it's local on your own machine or portable within a web interface. And with something like Kale, you can, and also the KFP SDK, you can start to deploy actual pipelines and take your functions and package them so you can run them on your Kubeflow systems. Notebooks, they run as containers inside Kubernetes pods, and we're going to kind of hit on the architecture behind those on a future slide. So why do we want to use Kubeflow notebooks? So really, this is, they help unlock a lot of the power of why we do containers and why we do Kubernetes. And a lot of these kind of shift left conversations you hear consistently, right? You do not want someone to be developing in one world and then deploying in a completely another, right? You don't want to say, hey, develop locally, or develop in your IDE. And now, oh, you need to create a pipeline, you need to make that function. Well, there's a lot of complexity in that. Here, now you have to learn Kubernetes, right? The power of Kubeflow notebooks is really having that user experience where you have that shared resources, you're using your notebooks, you're building things out, you have the standardization and understanding what's within your images. You can do that local testing, and then you can deploy it. So that's really what's going to give you that composability. It also gives you a clear administrative boundary, right? So you can use the access control of Kubernetes. So you can make sure that a developer, whether they're in a collaborative namespace or their own namespace, they only have access to what they need. Now, this is not meant to be, a slap your hand, don't give them what they need. This is still the ability to kick things off and test pipelines, but just kind of protecting you from accidentally maybe managing some custom resource or getting yourself in trouble. So you can really use RBAC to give you that granular control and understand what is and what isn't your responsibility. And again, with something like Kale, you can actually take your notebook and use that as a definition for your entire pipeline, from the data science code, getting your functions built out, to the dependencies, to what imports you need to bring along the way. And then you can kick it off, and Kubeflow will create that pipeline, create these containers, and handle kind of the marshaling, which is really cool, all from your notebook. There's 3 supported environments within Kubeflow. So the one that you really commonly hear about in the data science world, just because of how popular things like Python are and just the ability to explore data, is Jupyter Lab, right? Very common. There's also RStudio that's supported, as well as Visual Studio Code. Technically, any web-based IDE should work, although there's some configuration changes. If you have questions or need some additional functionality, Kubeflow Community Slack is a great way. I mean, if you have something you need to support, odds are someone else has something you need to support, and that's really how the platform is better. So RStudio, this is one that I'm not as familiar with. Of all the 3, this is one that I think I don't see as much traffic on. But it's an IDE for R and Python with a console and syntax highlighting editor, right? It supports direct code execution, tools for plotting, history debugging, workspace management. Currently branded as RStudio Team. There are open source and commercial versions. And again, it's another IDE workbench for data scientists and commonly used within the data science community. Visual Studio Code, a lot of developers really like Visual Studio Code. It's free, lightweight, cross-platform code editor from Microsoft. Hopefully everyone's had a little bit of experience with VS Code, but again, it's just another built-in IDE that you can leverage from Kubeflow. So you can actually spin up a server, and it could be Visual Studio, and you can start to leverage that IDE that you're used to locally. And then Jupyter Lab, again, open source web-based environment for creating Jupyter notebook documents. It's interactive. You can start to use these cells and version things and tag things. And note when we say a notebook, that can be a Jupyter web application, a Jupyter Python web server, or a document format. It's just this general concept of, when we're talking about in this presentation a notebook, we're saying that notebook server that you're accessing and manipulating to do things like data exploration or continuous pipeline development, etc. Again, this is the one we see very commonly. at least I see. Mainly a lot of data scientists I work with, they really like Jupyter Lab for a lot of the plugins, integrations, and just because of the popularity of the integration with Python. So we touched on this a little bit. Jupyter Lab and Kubeflow. Kubeflow notebooks allows you to spin up a notebook server, right? So I can request what volumes I want to attach to my server. I request what images I want to use on my server. I can determine the size of the different volumes, whether it's my workspace volume or my database volume. And it's also integrated with enterprise authentication and access control mechanisms. So you can actually choose who has access to what namespace in the Kubeflow dashboard, and based off their external authentication, you can choose what namespaces to have access to. Whether that's again a single namespace for their notebook, where they're just doing some basic experimentation, or potentially a shared collaborative namespace where they want to work with the team and maybe share a data set of some sort. We support kind of both ways, right, with notebooks.